As you may have noticed, many of the books you read at school are written by men. Well, that's exactly why we have feminist criticism. It looks at the way literature reinforces the economic, political, social, and psychological oppression of women. Feminist criticism focuses heavily on enormous roles played by gender. Gender is society's definition of femininity and masculinity in our lives. This heavily affects how our individual identities are formed. Our gender is how we relate to others, and it determines how we are treated by people. Now, why does whether we are more masculine or feminine affect the way we are treated or looked at in society? Well, that's what gender studies really focuses on. It focuses more on relationships between gender and the patriarchal oppression of women. There are four main focuses of gender studies: patriarchal assumptions about gender and gender roles that continue to oppress women, the way we conceptualize gender as either feminine or masculine, the relationship between sex and gender, and the relationship between sexuality and gender. Let's first look at the patriarchal assumptions about gender and gender roles that have continuously oppressed women. To start off, the way we currently conceive gender is inaccurate. People have taken inaccurate facts and myths about gender to determine what they believe gender should stereotypically be like. One common stereotype is men exhibiting an aggressive behavior. Society considers this behavior an instinct due to testosterone levels, though as said by Robert M. Sabalski, there is no research indicating that increased testosterone levels cause aggression. He explains that the level of testosterone will not be able to predict a man's aggression. It simply does not cause aggression. He also mentions the social factors and environment in which aggression occurs and how it is the main factor of aggressive behavior. Society has also forced men to believe that they have an instinct to be the breadwinner and the protector of the home. Well, now you might be wondering what the female instinct is. Women are stereotypically labeled with more nurturing instincts, forcing them to act as the caregivers and the nurturing support system of a household. According to Linda Brennan, research on emotions revealed that there may be few gender differences in the inner experience of emotion. Gender differences appear in how and when emotions are displayed. She claims there is few gender differences, meaning men and women aren't as different as most people believe. It's just society creating differences. People generally behave the way their gender is associated with because they feel that they need to fit their gender expectation. The main point you should be getting out of this so far is that gender is socially established rather than a matter of biology. The American gender system is a complex system referred to as the binary system. This gender system is composed of two genders, masculine and feminine, each corresponding to the two sexes, male and female. Because this system includes two genders that are considered polar opposites, there is no room for in between when it comes to what gender you are. People have gained a conscience that if you don't appeal to the gender your sex corresponds with, then there must be something wrong with you, which is obviously not the case.
America is not the only country with a gender system. In fact, there are countries that have non-binary gender systems. In some countries, men and women are considered more alike than different. Christine Helway observed many different societies in Southeast Asia and concluded that men and women are seen to have the same kind of capabilities and proclivities. They have the same conical shape, narrower at the base and wider at the top. The difference is simply that women's sexual organs are inside the body, while men's are outside the body. There is simply no reason for men to have superiority over women when they both are so similar. America has just developed these stereotypes that they expect people to follow, and because people don't know different, they end up accepting the system. Some cultures approach gender as a system of multiple possibilities. They actually had multiple gender systems they used. Most Native Americans have 4 to 5 genders. To them, it was a personal choice, but compared to the American binary system, you are assigned your gender at birth. The two-sex system simply doesn't fit the significant portion of the population. In fact, 1.7% of children each year are born intersexual, meaning they have mixed combination of male and female organ makeup. Now you might be thinking, why you rarely see intersex individuals? Well, frequently, babies are surgically altered to physically resemble either male or female, sometimes without parents' consent or knowledge. This brings up a good topic of, does there have to be a rush to surgery? The child, as it matures, should be able to make their own decision, not have someone else choose for them. Parents tend to be confused and wonder if their child is okay, but in reality, their child is fine. We are socially programmed to think within the confines of our binary sex and gender system. Through the years, more doctors have been rethinking if genital-altering surgery should be performed on infants. They want to wait so the child gets to choose their own identity.
Relating back to gender roles, there's a lot of unfair treatment towards the LGBTQ community because of them not conforming to specific gender roles. Gender stereotypes are typically heterosexuals, which leads the LGBTQ community to experience unfair treatment. Not conforming to gender stereotypes confuses people, and because of the gender system we have in America, people tend to react in a negative way. When discussing sex and gender, it's important to remember that we're talking about the way people live their daily lives, and we need to respect that. Now that you know about America's enforced binary gender system, how do you think people who don't fit directly into the gender and sex system feel on a basis? Sadly, as ridiculous as it sounds, gender discrimination exists in our society today simply because someone's sex and gender don't correspond. There are 3 common examples of sex and gender discrimination reported by Linda Perry and Deborah Ballard-Reach. The first act of discrimination is targeted towards those known as cross-dressers, meaning they dress in the attire opposite of their sex but act according to their biological sex. They are targeted by not only straight but gay people as well. Now, why would gay people target others who are similar to them? Well, that's because cross-dressers don't fit the stereotype of the gay cross-dresser. Gay transvestite is someone who acquires the attire opposite of their sex and acts according to the opposite biological sex. Gay transvestites may have encountered rejection by gay people to give the gay community a stronger voice in society. The last example reported looks into the life of a man who biologically changed his sex to match his gender identity. To think that his sex change would get him accepted into society because his sex would then match his gender is an understatement. People now didn't have a problem with the fact that his gender and sex didn't match, but now had a problem with his history of a physical transformation. There's no running away from discrimination. People will just find some other aspect to separate you from society. Now, you must be thinking what gender studies has to do with feminism. Well, if you think about it, feminism and gender studies are very closely related, both sharing a desire for justice and a change in society, and both endlessly trying to work towards gender equality. Feminists focusing for a solution to the patriarchal gender roles in hopes to attain equality between men and women, and gender studies, on the other hand, is focusing to expand our current perception on gender and understand its complexity. Let's now tie this information back to feminist criticism. As many societal issues include disagreement among opposing groups, feminist theorists and literary critics greatly disagree on how women are programmed by patriarchal ideology and if there's a certain feminine writing. This leads to the disagreement to whether or not women's literature should be separated from the writing done by men. And hopefully by now you would disagree with the statement, because there is just no reason to separate what women write from what men write because of the way they decide to live their life. Let's look into feminism and literature in a bit more depth now. Firstly, it's important to look at the way literary text reinforces patriarchal ideology. Knowing exactly how patriarchal ideology works is critical to our own ability to resist patriarchy in our own lives. Applying this knowledge when looking at literary work in the male canon was a dominating approach to feminist literary analysis during the 1970s. Now, how exactly was feminist analysis approached? Well, in order to get a deep feminist analysis, it's typically necessary to read against the grain of the text or author's original intentions, because patriarchal literature is usually blind to the sexist aspect it promotes. Of course it is. In fact, patriarchal literature writers don't even see anything wrong with the sexism they are promoting. Feminist analysis of literature doesn't just look at the sexism a work promotes. It looks at the other related areas in the text, such as character. The way female and male characters are functioning in the text, more so who is dominating and how. What about the way the good and bad girls are portrayed in the text and the outcome of the good and bad girls? Why is it that if a girl is submissive to the men in her life, she is considered good? Otherwise, they're just considered straight up bad. Now, does the text promote the belief that the good woman's place is in her home? When it comes to patriarchal literature, it's important to note the ways women are oppressed in the text you're reading. The way women are approached in the text influences the way women are approached in reality, which we all know isn't always so great. Think about it. How many times have you read about women being the dominators? Now think about how many times you've read about the typical man dominating the text. See what we mean? From cultural, social, political, and psychological feminist issues, feminist criticism covers just as much. Feminist criticism's goal is to increase awareness and understanding of the experiences women face and have faced in the past. We should just appreciate the value of women in the world rather than making up ways to push them down.